So we know kind of now what happens. People start changing their diet and they start to feel a lot better. And part of that, Nicole and I have talked a lot about this, is at some point you may have to address with your practitioner getting off of medications. And you've kind of gone down that path. Can you tell us what that was like, what the preliminary signs were for you that like maybe you could start to kind of taper off some of these drugs?
Yeah. So I started this project in December with the intention of not even like touching my meds, making any changes at all until like at least 6 months in, when I had a good idea of how it was affecting me. And yeah, if it was going to be possible to even reduce my meds at all. But I think it was about maybe even like 3 weeks in, it was very early on, where I started to experience like really intense sedation. And I didn't really know what was going on at first. I was like, oh no, is this the ketogenic diet? Like, is this a bad side effect or a version of keto flu or whatnot? But I started to realize that it felt very similar to any time I've been over medicated in the past. And it felt really similar to what I've experienced as a side effect, being sedation from antipsychotic medication. And so I talked to Nicole about it, and she put forward the idea or the concept of potentiation, which is where, my understanding, I'm not sure if I'm going to explain this right, but where I was using the ketogenic diet as a metabolic therapy and my system or whatever began to repair. And all of a sudden, it didn't need the same amount of medication anymore. And so I ended up being over medicated on the amount of medication that I was on before I started this intervention. And so, yeah, went right to my psychiatrist to kind of explain what was going on. And he was like, okay, well, let's try reducing and see how that goes. So I think I was on 100 milligrams of my antipsychotic at the beginning of this. So we reduced to 80 at that 3 week mark when I was really feeling the sedation, and immediately felt relief from that overwhelming sedation that I was experiencing. So it was very clear that it was potentiation that was happening. I was still feeling kind of sedated though. And so I went back to my psychiatrist and said, well, can we reduce it a little bit more even? Because I'm still getting these sedating effects. And so we actually went down to 60 milligrams too. And on that, I felt really good again and was feeling, back to being stable. So that was a really interesting element that I did not anticipate at all. The idea of potentiation and my body just not needing as much, and then, getting increased side effects as a result of being on too much. But after that, I kind of got more curious about, okay, well, clearly it's possible to go down off my medications, and the keto diet is doing something to support my brain and my body better. And so with my psychiatrist and with Nicole kind of overseeing it, we kind of created this plan, I guess, that was typically in like 8-month increments of gradually reducing more and more. And so I'm currently on 10 milligrams of my antipsychotic, where I started at 100. And even a year ago, when I was hospitalized, I was on 140 milligrams of this antipsychotic and 2 doses of another antipsychotic per day. And so it's wild how much I've been able to move away from psychiatric medication.
That's incredible.
And yeah, yeah.
That's incredible. As part of Nicole's presentation, she showed different curves of what the recovery process may look like for people. And I know kind of, I guess, how I would react to something where if something was looking like it was improving, I would stick with it. The second that I noticed some like weird side effect or something I hadn't noticed before, I would probably think, it's the diet. I'm just going to go back to what I was eating before. I knew this wasn't going to work. And
Yeah.
it, based on, again, her experience and some of those curves, it can be a bit messy where things might be getting better and then they might get a little bit worse for a little while. And it's not a sign that it's your diet is not working. It's that it's just taking time to adapt. Did you notice anything like that in the process of recovering and getting off of these drugs?
Yeah. So, I mean, getting off the medications, I definitely experienced bouts of withdrawal, which was interesting to kind of reframe my understanding of. I think I wasn't really aware of the withdrawal effects of going off of psychiatric medications. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. And there's just not enough knowledge in general about deprescribing as a concept. I think our medical system is very geared toward getting people on these medications, not really with a hope or idea of ever really getting them off, especially for illnesses like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, whereby the understanding is that they're just going to have to be on these medications for life. And so my psychiatrist didn't even really know much about how to safely deprescribe off these. And I think that that goes the same for a lot of other psychiatrists out there. And so I'm actually going slower in this taper than what my psychiatrist has recommended, because I did have such strong withdrawal symptoms. Things like brain fog, things like inability to concentrate, headaches. But I also learned that psychosis can be withdrawal induced. And so, kind of curious, all the times that I stopped taking my medications just cold turkey before, if I was just experiencing really intense withdrawal induced psychosis, which is why I ended up in the hospital, as opposed to what I was always told of, see, your illness returns in full force whenever you stop taking your medication. So that's been kind of an interesting thing to explore throughout all of this, is how little we know about deprescribing.
Yeah. Yeah. In a more recent video, you've described this process as like the world opening up to you. And I thought that was so beautifully said. And what an amazing experience that must be to like be inside your body, to be inside your brain and experience that healing, and feeling like you can get off of these medications with all these side effects. Describe kind of what that's like for you. And in the same video, you also describe, like, again, what we've been talking about as far as like the medical system and what you'd want somebody to know about the standard of care treatment that they're most likely to get if they go to a standard hospital.
Yeah. So I think I'm still working through processing the changes, because, I talked in the beginning about how important it was, or I thought it was, to come to a place of acceptance around what it means to live with a chronic illness like schizoaffective disorder. And yeah, I think there was almost a bit of resignation involved, that my life was never really going to look the way I had hoped, because of the struggles that came with navigating an illness like schizoaffective disorder. And so to have gone through these last 8 months where I am feeling better than I really ever remember feeling, I am not experiencing symptoms of my illness. And I think that people maybe often think, okay, so she's not experiencing hallucinations, delusions, those like major symptoms that you think of when you think of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. But it's like living with an illness like that kind of infiltrates every aspect of your life, and how you're able to take in the world around you and engage in your relationships and engage in your life. And so for like every facet like that to have improved. And yeah, like I said in that video, it just feels like my world is opening back up again, or my experience of relationships and the way I'm able to show up in life is just opening back up again. And it's beautiful, it's amazing, but it's also kind of hard to wrap my head around, in terms of, I struggled with this for like over a decade, and it didn't need to be that way. Yeah, it's a lot to process. And you asked about, the medical system and whatnot. And, I think the reality is, this is emerging information in science. Yes, the medical ketogenic diet has been used for like a century in terms of treating epilepsy and whatnot, but we're really just starting to explore its uses for treating mental illness as well. And so I hope that by sharing my experience and how profoundly it has impacted my experience of my illness and my life in general, I hope that that is going to encourage people within the medical system, mental health professionals, to really consider this as a incredible effective treatment modality for hopefully all of their patients, at least to
Mm,
give them the option of it.
lovely. Yeah. I love that. I need to remember that when I just want to have the reaction of anger towards the medical system, to remember that this is emerging. We should have known this a long time ago, and in a lot of fields we did, and that knowledge was lost with different pharmaceuticals being developed and everything. But I mean, how do you feel how do you feel about this this one family who is very successful professionally, and their son is bipolar, and after doing all kinds of different treatments without any success, they found metabolic therapies, and now through philanthropy, this family, the Bazuki family, has created the Bazuki Group, and they're funding some of these trials and studies and giving grants out. How does that make you feel to know that there's people out there willing to donate millions and millions of dollars towards something that we've all been wanting the money for, to do this research from the beginning?
I mean, it's incredible. Obviously, it's really propelling forward the science and even just propelling forward hearing people's stories. They're doing an amazing job of sharing other people's stories. And yeah, I think that was a big criticism that came our way a lot. Well, there's no research, there's no scientific evidence that supports this or anything like that. And so they're really doing a lot of that legwork in terms of making sure that science can happen. And it's really incredible. I feel like even just in the last 8 months that I've been involved in this sphere of metabolic health and this community, it's just advanced leaps and bounds in terms of the research that is coming forward, or the clinical trials that are wrapping up and publishing their findings and whatnot. That is just really incredible in terms of continuing to move this forward as a movement to change fundamentally how we approach illnesses like mental illness.
It's so amazing. And yeah, knowing all that, this is still something that should be taught, that people can understand that, yes, we're getting more evidence, more trials are being done, but there is a pile of case studies piling up, and people like yourself that are out there sharing the message. And people can do this. This is safe and effective for a lot of different things. So hoping that people know that as well. What's kind of in the future for you? What you mentioned, a plan that you can kind of put together as far as continuing to taper off. Do you think you'll be able to taper off completely? Is that part of your longer term or short term kind of plan that you guys have put together?
Yeah. So the kind of date I have circled in my calendar is, I think, September 15th or 17th or something. So it's very soon. It's coming up where I'm planning to just, yeah, completely stop taking my medication, go off of the 10 milligrams that I'm on currently. It's feeling very doable, because this last taper from 20 to 10, I had withdrawal symptoms for maybe 2 weeks, which really wasn't that bad and really manageable. And so, yeah, it's feeling really doable to be able to hopefully completely get off within the next month.
Wow, that's incredible. Wish
Yeah.
you all the best with that.